Bridget said she hoped it would be positive and constructive, and Mike echoed that. And you'll see in my title here, promise and progress. These are positive words beginning with P, so we're hopefully off to a semi-good start in that regard. Just a quick introduction for myself. You couldn't be blamed if you hear my accent and think that I'm really happy to be here in Leicester. But the reality is I've lived in England for 28 years. I've got 2 passports. One is a USA passport. The other is a British passport. And I can tell you over the last 2 days, I'm delighted to have that British passport. So let's see what... So we'll talk about... Bridget used the term outcome-based commissioning. It's a term we use with our local government clients and with our healthcare clients. Here I'm going to use the word services, outcome-based services. That's what we're talking about. It's what you deliver, outcome-based services. We'll talk about what's been going on in that space. We'll cover the promise a bit. I hope not too much. Maybe everyone's already bought in and thinks it's a great idea, but we'll test that a little. We'll talk about the evidence. I'll be interested if you've got particular evidence. We have some that we'll show you today. We'll talk about some of the challenges, the realities of making it work, that is, outcome-based services. And I hope it's not too self-serving. We'll talk a bit about what my little team is doing, but we'll also give you some pointers to what's going on around the country outside just what we're doing, and there is activity. And finally, I think even more importantly, what can you do? What does this mean to you? What action could you take? What should you do? What would be useful in your context? So that's our agenda. I think the challenges are understood, and I hope the definition isn't too difficult. We talk about care delivered on a time and task basis, that is, paid by the hour for care. It's something we regard as business as usual. Just looking for a few nods here. For outcome-based services, we see it as different. We see we're specifying an outcome rather than an input. We're not saying how many hours, we're saying what we want to have happen. And the tricky bit has always been paying for that outcome. Paying for the hour is easy to understand. I work an hour, I get paid for it. Getting paid for an outcome gets very complicated very quickly. So we really are talking about the latter, about the more complicated, trickier part. There are many definitions of this, and we're open to most of them. So if this doesn't quite match yours, please bear with me. Just a little question. I'd like to do a little survey of our group here using the traditional method of show of hands. How many saw our little online survey request? I put out a little online survey request. How many people saw it? Excellent. So let me just say, for those of you who responded, fabulous, because it's given us a little interaction in what's a pretty short, sharp speech. But if you haven't responded yet, I've left the polls open. I'll try to not do too many politic jokes here. We've got plenty of Leicester City opportunities. I hope it's a metaphor for what we're achieving. But I've left the polls open. You can vote anytime you want, and I'd like to hear from you. It's anonymous, so I won't know who you are. But it will tell us a few things. And here's the first thing it will tell us. Are you happy with the status quo? Are you happy with contracts based on hours? So, given that you all haven't participated, we'll do a little physical show of hands. How many people are happy with the status quo? Just show of hands. Okay. That's not very many. How many would prefer a system where delivery was based on outcomes rather than hours? Trickier question. Okay. Well, I do look forward to your electronic inputs. This is what the survey says so far, and it's mirrored by the group here. What I'll be looking for is if the preliminary sample doesn't match the group. That sometimes happens if you're a pollster, you know. Do you think the current system is sustainable? Show of hands. How many think it's sustainable? How many think it's somewhat sustainable? How many are neutral on the point? How many think it's unsustainable? How many think it's very unsustainable? You can leave your hands up. That's what we're seeing. And I noticed the heading of the Homecare magazine is that question. We've been asking it for about 2 years now, maybe 3, and I can tell you it's not moving towards sustainable. And the answers today look like that. So that's the argument for change. I think when Mike outlined the problems that beset us, the challenges, the one thing it does is it provides a platform for change. And if you're in my business, dare I say it, as a management consultant, change is what we're about. And if there's no good reason for it, it's sometimes hard to make it happen. There is an economic reality, and I put this question in to be a little provocative. I hope you don't mind. It was, well, if the hourly rate was reasonable, if it was reasonable, and you can make your own definition, would you be happy to carry on with business as usual? Show of hands. And please don't hesitate if you feel that way to show your hands. And how many would say no? We're not happy in general, even if the rate was fine. So I think that's relevant, and it's something that we need to bear in mind. There's a whole list of drivers here. But I'll move on. So what are you seeing? How many people here have already tendered for an outcome-based service contract? Show of hands. How many people have not? Another show of hands. You can pass, by the way, on the electronic survey. You can pass, and I'll take the hands that didn't go up as a pass. And how many have actually won and are in the middle of delivering outcome-based services? I think I know some of you. And how many are not? Okay. And you can pass on that one as well. So that's what you're seeing. You're seeing some activity, and we're in the middle of it, so we're seeing quite a lot. I'm going to do a little rundown of the market for outcome-based services, and we're talking home care here. There's a lot of reablement services, some drug and alcohol, done on payment by results, etc. A lot of healthcare define what they do as payment on results. Often they mean payment by activity. In 2012, Wiltshire launched Help to Live at Home. That's the name of their brand. I know some of you are working there. They actually started much earlier. In about 2008, they put up a tent in Lydiard Millicent. I've been here 28 years, and I lived in Wiltshire for the first part of my time here, so I know where Lydiard Millicent is. In 2015, Windsor and Maidenhead launched a contract called Care and Support at Home, and the idea is to deliver outcomes. They're still implementing, I should say quickly. Hampshire has issued a developmental contract. It's quite a large scale, and it allows for outcome-based services, still implementing. So only on paper at this point, called Support to Stay at Home. The London Borough of Greenwich, we did some work with them and their staff in a room about this size, kicking off outcome-based services. And they're not alone. We've listed some here, but not all. Lewisham, Buckinghamshire, Nottinghamshire, Warwickshire have all issued or are in the point of issuing outcome-based specifications. I'm sure you know of others. I do as well. I just haven't listed them all here. I think in 2017, we'll see more to come. So there's activity. It's one of those things that you could say it's been gathering steam for 10, 12 years, because there was a paper written on this, I think in 2006, called Outcome-Based Commissioning and why it would make a difference. And Wiltshire took that plunge, but it has been slow progress, and I don't want to present it otherwise. And that's why I put the turtle on the slide. I could have put a glacier, I suppose, but turtle's probably right. Turtles do move forward, and sometimes they beat the hare. We've got a lot of contracts. Most of them say developmental. Most of them say payment mechanism to be determined, which is something I'll address a little later on. I'll talk about the challenges. I'll talk about why that is just a little later on. But I'd like to go through the premise. Why is this a good thing? So, you numerate people, time on the lower axis, and level of support on the y-axis. And most packages are commissioned, and they go for a while, and they tend to be flat. If you have other experience, I'll respect that, but this is certainly what we see. We think that outcome-based services can change that by putting investment up front, followed by improvement. So the green line is the investment. You have to spend more at the front end, and if the outcomes are met, then you'll get a benefit at the back end. So let's go a little deeper into that. In order for that to be true, things have to change. In other words, Mrs. Brown or Mrs. Miggins or whatever your favorite name is, has to become more independent. Now, I like to think in as broad a term as I can that he or she will become completely independent, that they will not need your services any longer because they've been re-abled. Enabled, use your term. But here's my question, do you believe it? Do you think that's possible? So we put in our survey, which you can take, and I'll ask you in a minute. I've given a little 5-point scale. And I've also, it says, do you believe private pay home care users? I think we're allowed in this day and age to admit our mistakes in public. So what I meant to do was follow up with state-funded. But all I asked was private pay. So I've got a sample that's answered that, and I'm going to ask you the same question. Just think about your private pay customers. Can they become independent? Show of hands. I got a few. How about somewhat independent? A little better than they were. That's encouraging. Neutral, don't know. No idea. No, but they can maintain. They can keep that flat line. Okay, I mean, if you already voted for the higher one, I suppose it is a single select question. And finally, no, most will decline. Most will decline. It's okay. And let me say, which I think I've said here, all right, I said here we need to believe this. In order for it to make sense to do outcome-based services, we have to believe that. This is controversial. I'll say out at the upfront. Do we create dependence? And by we, I mean the whole system. Everybody from the Department of Health to the LGA to every social services group you can think of, to our home care association. I'm including all of us. Do we create dependence? Do you agree or disagree? So first of all, do you disagree about creating dependence? Okay. And how many are neutral on the point? How many people think we create dependence? Okay. Well, to put my cards on the table, we do believe that. We think that things are geared so the incentives and the system creates dependence. Now that's difficult if you're in the system. We don't want to do that. No one set out to do that, but we think that's where we are. And I'll also say opinion is divided among professionals. And I've had this conversation many times and can tell you that some people are pretty passionate that we do not create dependence. We serve need eligible need where it needs to be served, it's important. If we do create dependence, we'd like to change that. Everyone would agree. So where's the evidence that we can change it? I put up 2 slides here just to give you a flavor. I think evidence is sparse. And if you go around the social care system, unfortunately, you find the baselines aren't set very well, and that the statistical evidence that would prove to you that we can move to this outcome-based model is not sufficient. You can't go on that evidence alone. We've been working with the Newcastle Institute for Aging, and they've developed what they call the life curve. And it looks like this. This will take a couple minutes. What we have here are activities of daily life, which you can't read. It's a little hierarchy. It starts with cutting your toenails at the top and feeding yourself at the bottom. And what the research shows is that people go through a progression. Now, not every single person, but enough to be statistically valid. And that's important because it means it's an opportunity to intervene. If you know somebody can't cut their toenails, you know they're at the start of a progression. If you can intervene to help them stay here, this is function. So if you're maintaining your function here, you're doing pretty well. Oh, I see you're going to decline. So this is decline. But what you'll see is it's fairly short and sharp. What we're used to is a steady decline. And the research would say, without intervention, we get a steady decline. And this at the bottom it's where none of us want to be. We're still alive, but we're not, our quality of life is quite diminished. We're in care. This red bit is in care. And what's very important and not too clear from the graph is both of these curves, these are 2 different people. I'll call this one Ted. Ted has maintained his function, but he's then declined, and this is Gladys. And Gladys has declined, and she and Ted live to be the same age. That's what the research shows. And that's very interesting. It's not that we're prolonging life, we're prolonging quality of life. That's the idea. So we think this evidence is really important. We're working with this group on applying it. It's one thing to know cutting your toenails matters. It's another to apply it. So that's a big part of our world right now. I'm not going to go into detail. It's in the pack. I presume we'll send the pack out. So if you're the kind of person who likes reading studies, read Giska Peter's study based on the Australian longitudinal study of 40,000 women over 15 years. So that's where the basis comes from. And we just don't have much like that. That's why we've gone to Australia. There isn't much like it. So what are the challenges? I think you could tell me this. You could probably write the slide better. Transferring current cases. Let's say you've won the outcome-based contract. And now you've got to take on the cases. Transferring is pretty challenging. And recruiting staff. We know that's difficult for many reasons. The payment mechanism we know is difficult for 2 or 3 reasons. Managing tight budgets is just always in the background. It's been impinging on everything we do for the last 8 years, and it's a real issue. And we think to come will be retaining the staff. Right now we're just trying to bring them in, but retaining is a big issue. Training in new techniques. So outcome-based services sounds great, but might be a little different than simply providing care by the hour. We think it is. And finally, this doesn't get a lot of press, but shifting the expectation from the end user standpoint. You may use the word customer. Our local authority customers will say, our clients will say service user. The health authority might say patient. But you know who I'm talking about. These are people who are getting care, and they have an expectation. Sometimes the expectation is not regaining independence, or they didn't know they could. It's not something they were thinking about. This is an old graph of doom. It shows the decrease in social care budgets. I won't dwell on it because I think we all know this, but it is quite relevant. It's set to go on. So here's what's relevant about that. We think that outcome-based services are perhaps the only win-win-win-win-win going right now. And I'll explain that the customer wants to be independent. That shows up in your surveys. It shows up in ours. People don't really want strangers coming to their home to take care of them. The commissioner has a whole list of things: personalized, safe, quality, cost-effective. But with that budget chart I just showed you, that cost-effective is really challenging. So if I said to a commissioner, we can help people be independent. If they're independent, they don't need care, it's a big win for them. The provider, that's you, wants to deliver excellent care at a fair price. Hopefully I haven't garbled that too much. We like to be correct with the audience. And the care worker wants to deliver excellent care for a living wage, perhaps a little more. The health service would like to relieve the burden on acute services. And again, there's a real opportunity here. So I think that's a little picture on the promise, a little view of the progress. I keep clicking the wrong one. And just a few things that we're doing. We run a series of workshops in Cambridge. We invite a diverse audience. It's a lot of local authority commissioners, healthcare commissioners, and a reference group from the UKHCA. You might be interested to know. I know at least a couple of you here have been there. If it's something that really interests you, and we get into the mechanics of how to make this work, then let your team at the UKHCA know. We have a standing invitation to your reference group. We have been promoting the concept of a generic, co-produced payment mechanism. We think that's the best way than working it out borough by borough. We run a master class. Andrew, I presume you're saying my time's actually up. Or was that the 2 minute? 2 minutes, no worries. Okay. I don't feel so pressurized. We've delivered co-production with, when I say staff, it being provider staff and local authority staff. And we've done I think if any of you were in the Windsor and Maidenhead events, we organized those. And we've offered seminars to the industry. One of the things we'll do shortly is we'll offer seminars to you, so you can sign up for, I'll say it now, a very nominal fee to come to one of our seminars and get in depth. I've done what I can in 20 minutes, but there is so much more detail we can go into. What can you do? All right, embrace. I hope it's not too strong a word, but look into it. If you believe this, then you can embrace it. You can participate in the UKHCA's thinking. We've done a lot of work with Colin. Bridget's spoken at one of our events. We think there's a lot of room to co-produce here. Talk to your local authority. Do it before the tender comes out. Include health. The prize for health and social care is huge. And be ready. I suppose that's all part of it. We think this is coming. Will it be like a tsunami or just a rolling wave from Cornwall? I don't know. But it is coming. It's definitely not slowing. And the co-development approach. It's new enough. It's the only way that we could see. You can't just come and say, okay, we'll take it from here. It's got to be transparent and co-produced. The last thing in my survey was, what is your favorite football team? This is a wordle of it. It's a total misuse of the technology, but I thought I'd put at least one football reference in there. I support Crystal Palace for those who care. I guess it'll go in our slides. If you'd like to contact us, you can buttonhole me at this convention. I'll be here today and delighted to talk to any of you who would like to. I've probably done what I've hope not to do and used all the question time by speaking at you. I hope the survey felt a little interactive, and I look forward to meeting you individually. Thank you very much.